welcome to Dynamics Update. This time we are not in our regular setting. We are actually on site in Slovenia for Dynamics Mind Conference. And with me, as usual, my colleague Gustav and Johan.
Hello. It's very nice to be here in Portorož, Slovenia.
Yes, it's much nicer than sitting at 10 o'clock in the evening doing podcast recording from my own office.
Next to my laundry hanging, right?
Exactly.
Venue,
exactly. But as we usually do, we actually have a guest today. Jared, please introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks for having me on the podcast. We're at Dynamics Minds Conference. This is my first time in Slovenia, my first time at the conference. It's been a fantastic event, and excited to sit with you two and talk about your expertise and just talk through.
Yeah,
being on the podcast.
You're the expert here, so we're going to grill you. No, I'm just kidding. But the whole last year on the Dynamics Minds as well, the topic was very much oriented around Copilot, right? So I think we counted the times. I think everyone had a drink every time one said Copilot. It's fairly similar now, but I think it's more of a shift to the agent discussion, right? Copilot as an assistant being level 1, and then the whole discussion on the keynote as well, where we are moving more and more into autonomous agent, like era of agents, right? So Jared, I know you have a lot of work in that area, right? So maybe start by telling us what you do.
Right. So my work right now is primarily on the F&O Copilot Foundation or Agent Foundation, where we're building the tools and utilities that are needed for not only our Microsoft teams to build agents on top of our agent framework, but also extensibility for customers and partners that need to extend those experiences. We want to make sure that those tools are available for customers to extend what we are shipping out of box to be something that they can really fit and tailor to their organization.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, it's so much content coming as well. I mean, if you look at all the sessions here at Dynamics Minds, a lot of them cover extensibility. And I think maybe is that where, because Copilot Studio is there, right? It's been there for a while now, and you can build a lot of cool interfaces as well. I noticed that the UI switched from having like Copilots. Now it only says agents, right? So it's kind of the same thing. But it's so cool what you can do with Copilot. And I think a lot of these sessions, a lot of customers at least, sometimes they're on the border of like, oh, it's too scary with AI. But when you see what it can do as an interface towards our like complex ERP systems, it's really a game changer. Do you see a lot of like those questions from customers still, like the going into AI feels a bit worrying for customers?
Right, and I think that's. I had a session yesterday morning on that topic. Just Copilots and agents for finance and operations apps. And the theme that I have recognized when I talk to customers and partners is a lot of times when we talk about AI, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah,
like exactly. You'll sit down with someone who has this grand vision for what AI is going to do for your organization, and they're going to show you the world's best agent. And it's, try to overhaul your entire ERP system with AI overnight, and customers will just kind of shut down. Like, I don't know where to start when you bring that message to me. So the message that we're trying to get across at this point is AI it's revolutionary. It's a technology that's going to revolutionize the way we do business over time. Yeah. But you don't need to start by completely overhauling your ERP system. Just find those small scenarios where you can see quantifiable value, where there's a scenario like the quick demo that we did. Actually, this was something that I was working with another partner that went into an organization. They said, we just need product descriptions. Yeah. It's super simple. LLMs can write that really quickly, and like they're saving 30 to 45 minutes for every product that gets entered in the system just by having AI write it in 3 seconds. But the real value here is that we're taking an agent with an LLM with agentic orchestration and connecting it to the data and business logic of your ERP system so that we can have it all connected up, click a few buttons, enter a few prompts, and you've got that seeming magic happening behind the scenes with the LLM connected to all that data.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where we see a lot of like the demos here as well, where to me, I use the likeness of like a Pokemon or a Tamagotchi I mentioned to you one as well in my session, because you have an agent and it's only as capable as what you feed it, right? With topics and actions and knowledge. But if you give it the correct actions, and there are a lot of actions right now, you can really see, you can use that LLM because you only need to do those, connect the dots, right? And then you get an agent that's powerful enough to do, like, let's say, for instance, asking for on-hand inventory or creating an order. You don't have to like teach it every step. You can just say, okay, this is where you create an order. This is where you check for on-hand data, and then just flick the generative AI switch, and it kind of works fairly good. So it's abstracting these really complicated things that would take hours of integration work to do before, and it's just doing it, right? And you need to test, of course, but it's
And I
simplifying.
also think that it's really cool that we're going from like we used to have this Swiss Army knife of LLMs or agents that one model did everything and all the time, which also meant that we were probably having an agent or an LLM that was actually much more powerful that we actually needed. So we're going more and more towards purpose-built agents for certain tasks, and building that ecosystem and getting the model that we talk to actually to understand that there are other functionality that you can click into.
Right. And I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that's often a misconception about LLMs is that LLMs can just do stuff. Like they automatically just know everything because they've read
magic,
the internet.
yeah.
It's magic that happens. And we need to kind of temper those expectations and say, like, an LLM is a large language model. It is fantastic at understanding language. And it appears to be magical.
It's really good at convincing you that it can do everything.
Right, right. But really, it can.
Yeah, it's a mansplainer.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. But I mean, it out of like just by itself, the language model doesn't understand business logic.
No.
And that's one of the things where we feel like ERP has a huge opportunity to contribute to this agent framework by bringing all of that business logic and the ERP data into that framework. So if we have those very deterministic business processes for depreciating an asset or printing our financial statements, those are things that are defined in code. They're also defined in law. We can't have an LLM trying to predict what that logic is when we already have the logic written in code.
Yeah.
So that's where we have that value of bringing an agent sitting on top of an ERP system and being able to connect to that code and run those operations.
Yeah.
And so that everything is, the agentic orchestration is driven by the LLM, but is able to call deterministic code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, that's also a good point that you're making, that an LLM only understand, the only thing that it understands by itself is language. Everything else you need to teach it. So if you need to teach it 1 + 1 is 2, you actually need to tell it 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 2 is 3, because it doesn't make any, it can't count, it can't calculate by itself. So you need to teach it facts instead. And in this case, having other functionality that can be used to do that is probably a good thing. And FNO has a lot of that functionality, so being able to use it is a good thing.
the trick must be, I mean, there's a lot of talk of MCP as well, Model Context Protocol, like the language to which we teach. Because as you say, LLM is not the problem here. We can easily do a mansplaining Pokemon situation, right? It's just that it can't really, we need to teach it what to do. So MCP is one way of doing, like, okay, here is a set of instructions that you can follow, and then you don't need to understand what happens like underneath, like interface logic, right? So it's the tricky part with ERP here is making sure that it can do what it does, but also like working off the telemetry on the data and of how people normally post like journals, for instance, and what they do whenever when an error occurs, right? So if you're only clicking this button every day, the same button every day, that's an easy task. But if on day 7 something happens and you need to make a decision, that's where the tricky part comes in, I would imagine, right? Working with how our users normally handle problems. So that's, I would guess telemetry comes into play there.
Right. So, and that's where telemetry comes into play. That's where memory comes into play. And that's where agents and having an LLM with that generative orchestration really comes into play because it can adjust.
Yeah.
Whereas in code, if it's all deterministic, you have those defined processes and there's no flexibility there.
No.
But if we can take an LLM and put that into generative orchestration and give it kind of memory about what the user typically does, train it over telemetry, train it over test data that we have, then it's able to adjust to those scenarios and become more functional in being able to call the right action at the right time. So the orchestration itself, once it decides what the right action to call is, then we can flip over and call that deterministic code to actually perform the operation. But having the flexibility within the agent framework is very important for us going forward.
Exactly. And that's also a key point, to kind of not don't wait to elaborate on what your agent can do for you within your organization, because as you say, you don't need to build this autonomous big Terminator 2 like feeling autonomous ERP just yet. You can just find a use case for it, be it interfacing. I normally reach out a lot with like using an agent to do a task like creating a customer order or like exposing an agent that interacts with someone. That's where you really can use the LLM model and some actions. And that's very, very easy to set up with what we have in mind right now. And that might be your first, like dipping your toes into the AI. But as soon as you have that agent, then it will pop up, right? You have other use cases around there where you can find one little agent do one thing. And as soon as you start using those things, then you will start to learn how to implement agents in your business. So it's not that hard to get started, is my point, I think.
But I was at your session yesterday, and you mentioned an example where you had talked to a customer where they had a person that they figured they could actually replace with an automation.
Right.
And then they sort of paused and they thought, so what's her purpose now? And I think this is a really good point, because first of all, you had a direct consequence of replacing someone or something with an automation or an agent or whatever it is.
Right.
But you sort of assume in that reasoning that this person's only purpose is to perform what you're automating. But usually at a company, people have many purposes.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them documented. And what was interesting was that you mentioned that we need to sort of calculate the ROI. The problem is that if you calculate the ROI, you can only calculate things that you can measure.
Yeah.
And if you have certain values that you are not able to measure in a company, then the ROI will get skewed, because it won't reflect the truth. It won't reflect everything else. So, I mean, one thing I heard, I don't remember where it was, they talked about like customer service agents. And someone said that it's probably a really, really good idea to have customer service agents available to the support staff. Yeah. It's probably a much worse idea to have customer service agents available to end users, to someone who isn't used to, who doesn't understand that this is not a person.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I see, for instance, my own parents. They are like 80. They are not used to dealing with someone who is not the person. So if you can use the agent to make the support scenario more effective, but without replacing the person who actually interfaces with people, I think that's a really, really good idea as well.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of touching on that topic of like kind of responsible AI, of how are we responsible with the artificial intelligence that we're infusing into business systems. Because you mentioned, I was just reading Mustafa Suleiman's book, and he kind of touches on this point of, in the coming wave, as this new technology that's really going to bend the curve of innovation comes in, people are going to be replaced, and not necessarily replaced, but moved to something else.
Yes.
And I think that's the big question of what do we do next? And so it's kind of a topic that came up, I mean, even before this AI revolution that started just a few years ago with LLMs. And it's been a topic that's been around for a very long time. I remember Convergence. Did you two ever attend Convergence?
Yeah, we did.
That conference doesn't exist anymore, but a lot of good memories. There was one presentation in the keynote where the keynote presenter was presenting some work that he had done researching robotics. And he had some algorithms that had a swarm of small little robots rolling around the stage, and how they worked together. Like one robot would do one thing and the others would be able to react to it, and they all work together because they're communicating with each other. And so afterwards he had a Q&A, and somebody asked him, or he said, one of the most common questions that I get is, what are we going to do when the robots take over?
Exactly.
Like what are humans going to do next? And he said, like, it's been a problem since the beginning of time. And ever since the beginning of the first farm tools that made it more efficient for us to do farming, that enabled other people to move on and do bigger things. And that's always going to be the new thing. Every time a new technology comes in, humans are going to have opportunities to stop doing more and more of that manual labor and go find something that advances humanity.
Definitely.
And so I think that's the challenge, and Suleiman calls that out in his book as well, is trying to figure out what is that thing. Like, what do we go do next? And I don't think anyone's answered that quite yet,
so
but
I
it
think
gives us that
the
opportunity.
So I think from a philosophical philosopher perspective, it's true on a bigger scale, but the problem is that it still affects individuals. It still affects people. And if you're part of an organization where you don't look beyond the numbers, then there is a big risk that your small context will treat the numbers in the wrong way. They will interpret the numbers in the wrong way because they are not able to measure the other values in this equation. They will only see what you do in this automation context and nothing else.
Right.
And I think that's what people are scared of. I mean, if the whole problem, I think, isn't that we replace a person doing a chore with something else doing a chore. The problem, I think, we reduces people to a number, and that number is the only thing that decides. We have seen this in multiple different, like, not to the least the financial discussions, that eventually we are at numbers because that's the least common denominator. But the problem is that it doesn't show the whole picture.
Right. But I mean, that's always the case, right? I mean, ERP, as you say, from the beginning of time for ERP, a batch job, you could argue, can replace someone because it automates a task. So I think one of the problems with AI that I encounter now in conversations, and I would imagine you do as well, is replacing someone with a better tool is one thing, because you can always understand that this tool is better. But AI is so, I think the AI word is a kind of complicated one because people are afraid. They don't understand what it is. What is this thing that's going to replace my job? But the more we enable co-pilots and enable all of these new fancy stuff within our ERP, I think the more people actually understand, okay, it's not actually taking my job. It's making my job easier. So I think, hopefully at least, that the more we understand how these tools are working, because now a lot of stuff is in preview, right? A lot of stuff that we're talking about here, we see it in demos, it's working, but it's not being like, it hasn't reached this mature level yet where people actually understand. I won't understand an LLM model, I think, at least. I saw in the machine learning studio before, you had this like big mathematical cheat sheets. I didn't understand it, but I could understand the tool. I can understand what it's trying to do. And I think that hopefully makes the conversation a little bit easier when it comes to implementing these things. It doesn't necessarily have to be ROI and like replacing 2 or 3 people, which is absolutely a valid case from a financial perspective. But it's also about, as you said, Johan, making the scenarios more efficient, making everyone being able to focus on something that's more important than just posting this journal and doing this 50 clicks to find whatever information I want to find right now. So as soon as we get into that mindset, I think that's where we can really level up and go to that next level of agentic eras. At least I hope so.
Well, yeah, I think you're raising some good points. And like one of the examples I talked about in my session yesterday was the scenario of writing a product description, because the partner that I was talking to, this is Anata, familiar with them. They do ISV extensions, an ISV extension for F&O for automotive sales and automotive service centers. And so their scenario was they needed the salespeople are spending 30 to 45 minutes each time a car comes in to write that product description, and they want those people out on the talking to people, not sitting in front of a computer. So this isn't necessarily even replacing people. If you have the right targeted scenario where you can see that ROI, you're taking someone who's in front of a computer and getting them out making human connections.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the learnings that we see with AI is that there is value in human connection, immense value in human connection.
Definitely, yeah.
So if you can use AI to free people up from sitting in front of a computer and get them to be more strategic and getting them in positions where they can make those human connections, I think there's a lot of value here.
Definitely, yeah. We just need to get to that point, and I think to scale off those worries that people might have that, okay, it's too complicated, I don't understand it, by showing how it works. And I think we're doing just that right now with all the new agents coming, the supplier communications agent, all that stuff coming into ERP. So I mean, our listeners, I think maybe are not the ones to convince, perhaps, but I think maybe just enabling those in UD environments and showing off what they can do. I mean, looking at a few sessions here, it's really cool. It's still in the beginning in many cases, of course, but again, back to telemetry, the more we enable these agents to run in actual scenarios and actual customer implementations, the more data we get, the more efficient we get, and the more use cases I think we will find. So hopefully people can just flick it on and evaluate. It's my point.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I mean, could you talk a bit about the specific concepts that are coming to FNO when it comes to agent? Because you have released a whole bunch of preview agents right now that are available.
Yes. We have 6 agents that were just released last month in public preview. Encourage everybody to go try them out. If you two haven't yet, I encourage you to get them set up and just try them out.
Yeah.
And I think that what we have is we've released scenarios that are really useful in freeing up a lot of the manual work that people can do. One of the great examples is, and it utilizes that LLM, is a supplier communication agent that manages communications between you and your vendors.
Yeah.
So a vendor sends you an email, and it's just kind of a free-form email. It's not a structured message that a computer would typically be able to understand, but it's saying something like, we need to change the quantity, or our ship date is going to change. And then anytime something like that happens from a supplier, that could mess up your supply chain.
Yeah.
Because what I'm expecting to be received has stuff that it's planned to do, and so I need to react to that. So with an LLM, it's like something we couldn't automate in the past, we can now automate, because an LLM can take that email and process it, understand the intent of that message, and then with actions and tools available in that agent, perform operations in the backend system. So these are some of the tools that we're releasing out of box to just kind of get people started with AI and thinking about some of the scenarios where you can take someone who's sitting reading emails all day and clicking buttons through a supply chain and move them to something more strategic, and let an LLM that can read an email read the email.
Yeah. I actually think that people tend to underestimate the language parts of LLMs. I mean, I have this Google Home speakers at home, and you can tell them to set a timer, you can tell them to play a song, and sometimes it actually works. But I mean, just leveling up the language understanding, I would say, is a real big game changer, because actually having someone reading an email, being able to tell me in much shorter terms, what is this about? What do you need to do? Where is the action list? Having an agent in like a Teams meeting, being able to post an action list after the meeting is really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Super enhancer of efficiency.
It's really, really powerful, because it means that I don't have to spend 30 minutes after the meeting writing meeting notes, understanding what I need to do, scheduling it in my calendar, because this can do it for me.
Yeah.
So I think that it's sort of the main purpose of the LLMs, but it's also something that sort of you look past it, because it's like, it's not that exciting. We have had Siri who understands language, but not really. It doesn't really understand language in the way that an LLM does.
Oh, exactly. And it goes back to what you said, Jared, as well. I mean, that part in itself, like interpreting a supplier email and then taking that information and putting it into actionable tasks within the ERP. I think that's the key here. And you can also, I mean, to avoid the fear of like destroying anything, just make suggestions. So you take away the time that person has to spend on reading that email, digesting the data, finding the data, and doing some, okay, maybe I need to do this, to an agent doing that. And you don't have to automate it like 100%. You can have the agent say, okay, I'm suggesting that you're going to do this, which saves you a lot of time. And then when you reach that level of matureness and trust that you might get, because the same vendor always emails us on Fridays with always the same change, then automate it. So you can do those changes. You can jump in, dip your toes, and then when you're at the level where you can trust it, then you can flick that switch. And I think that's the whole point, like getting started with just these suggestions, because you don't want to spend time reading emails if you can avoid it, right?
Exactly. But I mean, it's sort of almost, I one of the things I value in FNO a lot is the search box on top.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to remember exactly where everything is. And I would say that this is sort of the next level of the search box. Now I don't even have to know what it's called. I can just say, I want to do something like this. And it will tell me, you need to go here, you need to click there, you need to fill out these fields. And
Right.
Yeah, I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I'm dreaming of the whole like computer setup. Computer do this, computer do that. In the ERP
absolutely.
context. So we'll see when we get there. But I can do it at home right now, at least.
Yes. So is there anything that we need to watch out for going forward?
Well, I think the things to keep a watch out for are just additional agents coming out from Microsoft. We're going to continue to release our agents, but action items that I'd like everyone to take from this podcast would be try them out. try out the agents that are already in public preview. We have several from project operations, field service, finance, supply chain management, already available, that are performing some automations on some business processes already. Those will continue to come out from Microsoft, but we're not going to release them at the pace that customers should be taking up this revolutionary new technology. So take a look at just ways that you can extend and customize your own agents within your environment. That's a fantastic tool set in Copilot Studio. Really great utilities for connecting that agentic orchestration from Copilot Studio back into finance and operations, either from using custom APIs to connect to the business logic, using connectors, using knowledge sources over F&O data. And also earlier in the discussion, you talked about MCP.
Yeah.
Which was a fairly big announcement for us last week at Build.
Exactly.
We have a model context protocol server for finance and operations apps. It's the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server available in Copilot Studio. So that's rolling out today. It's in the rollout train. Will be available in all environments by the end of June. Once you're on 10.044 for F&O. But it's publishing a list of tools that's available, and all you need to do is simplifies that development experience and the extension just by you add that server, and suddenly all of the tools and resources that are available in that server become available to that agent. No one-by-one picking of those actions. You just have it there, and then you start talking to it in natural language, and it knows those operations. So in a few clicks, you have an agent that can do something.
That's very cool.
I mean, the MCP protocol is a real game changer. When I was explained this to me the first time, it was like, wow. I liken it sort of when we went from doing CSV files to go to XML files. Because all of a sudden we don't have just a text file, we have a text file with context. And now we have an agent that understands the context of something else as well. But I would also say that one of the other things that people can do as well is actually going the other way around that you talked about before, like with the project descriptions. Find your pain points. Find what things, if you were to just flick a switch, which things would you automate away? Which things would you just fix?
Right.
Because now with Copilot Studio, you will probably find someone who can do that for you, if it's a certain kind of tasks.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the hard parts of new technologies. A lot of times you don't know how to take it up in your environment.
No.
It's like, I don't know where to go with it. So the more ideas that we see coming out, I think a lot of people, that'll trigger some ideas in their own mind. It's like, oh, well, that's a neat idea. I can apply it in my environment this way. So if we just, I know us in the room that we've been playing around with examples, and we're trying to evangelize those examples, but that's going to trigger additional thought.
Hopefully, yeah.
In the community. And once the community picks it up, I think it's going to take off pretty quickly.
Exactly. Good words.
Yes.
So,
I think we actually, at the end, we have done about the 30 minutes recording. So let's just say
Thank you so much.
will be happy to welcome you back at some point.
I'd love to.
When you have more agents to show us.
Exactly. Or when we played around with agents and we had
when
to
your
ask Jared.
agent army grows.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jared. And it's
thanks
very
for
nice to be
having
here
me
in
on.
person as
This was
well.
fun.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.